He was expelled for one reason: being a farmer's son. No warning, no mercy. But just when it seemed like his dreams were crushed forever, a billionaire's helicopter landed on the school lawn, and what followed shook an elite institution to its core. This is the story of a young man's quiet strength, a powerful reckoning, and what happens when someone finally says, enough, based on true events. Watch until the end. You won't forget this one. The thud of Daniel Reyes' backpack echoed in the narrow hallway of Ashton Hill Academy like a gavel slamming down on a sentence. He stood frozen, shoulders squared, staring at Principal Everett Whitmore as the words landed harder than any fall he'd ever taken working the land. This school was built for legacy, Daniel, not labor. Daniel's chest tightened, his fingers curled into fists at his sides. He wasn't dumb. He'd known since his first day at Ashton Hill that he didn't exactly blend in. The other students arrived in black cars with tinted windows and monogrammed duffels. He rode the public bus at 6 a.m., carrying the faint smell of hay and soil that no amount of morning showers could quite erase. Still, he had fought to be here. Straight as, honor roll. Top math scores in the entire district. He hadn't come for handouts. He had come to prove he belonged. "With all due respect, sir," Daniel said, voice trembling but steady, "I earned my place." Principal Everett didn't blink. His gray blazer looked like it cost more than Daniel's entire monthly grocery budget. "Your performance isn't the issue. It's the optics." Daniel flinched. "That word. You mean because I'm poor?" Everett tilted his head slightly, like he was explaining something to a stubborn child. "This school has donors to satisfy, Daniel. We need to maintain our standard." Two security guards entered the office without a word. They flanked Daniel like he was a threat, instead of a 17-year-old boy who tutored half the freshman class in algebra for free. "Escort him out. He's no longer a student here," the principal said flatly, returning to his desk as if Daniel had already vanished. As they walked him through the hallway, Daniel caught a glimpse of Brittany Lancaster, whispering to her friends, covering her smirk behind a manicured hand. At the end of the corridor, Logan Pierce, the football captain whose dad sat on the board, leaned against the lockers and gave Daniel a slow clap. "Guess Ashton Hill's finally taking out the trash," Logan called out. Daniel kept walking. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. Outside, the wind bit at his face, but it didn't sting half as much as the silence inside him. He walked the 2 miles back to the farm, his boots dragging in the red dirt of County Road 9. When he reached the gravel driveway, his mother was already on the porch. She always knew when something was wrong. She looked at him, really looked, and her hand flew to her mouth. "They expelled me," he said, voice low. His mother's eyes welled. His father came from behind the barn, wiping oil from his hands with an old rag. "They said, I don't fit their image," Daniel added. "Said I was lowering their standard." His father didn't speak, just walked over and pulled Daniel into a hug that was part apology, part shield. Daniel stayed there for a moment, head against the shoulder that had carried this family through droughts, debt, and long winters. "We'll figure something out," his dad said. But even Daniel could hear the crack in his voice. That night, Daniel lay in bed, staring at the wood-paneled ceiling. His fingers itched to grab his textbook. Study. Prove them wrong. But what was the point? They didn't care what was in his head. All they saw was the dirt under his nails. He replayed Principal Everett's words over and over until they dug trenches in his chest. "You don't belong." And maybe they were right. Maybe people like him weren't supposed to dream that big. But deep down, buried under layers of disappointment and exhaustion, a flicker of defiance smoldered. If no one was going to fight for him, maybe someone should. Maybe someone would. He just didn't know that someone would arrive the very next day in a helicopter. It started with a hum, low, distant, like a storm building behind the hills. Then came the vibration. By the time the students of Ashton Hill Academy spilled out into the courtyard, textbooks clutched and hair whipping in the wind, the roar had crescendoed into something no one could ignore. A black helicopter hovered above the pristine lawn. It wasn't a news chopper or police. No, this machine was sleek and silent in the places that mattered. Matte black panels, silver trim. The insignia on the side gleamed like a crest. Tarrington Industries. Students gasped, teachers stared. Phones were pulled from pockets like weapons of disbelief. Is that a private helicopter? Someone asked. Who flies to a school? Another replied. Principal Everett marched out of the administration building, flanked by two confused staff members. His blazer fluttered in the gust. He looked like a man trying to maintain order on a ship taking on water. Then the door to the chopper opened. Out stepped a man in a charcoal overcoat and polished leather shoes. He was tall, broad-shouldered but lean, like a man accustomed to being in control. His salt and pepper hair was slicked back with purpose. Everything about him, from his clean-shaven jaw to the platinum cufflinks glinting in the sunlight, spoke one word: power. Dean Tarrington. The name hit like a thunderclap through the crowd. Billionaire CEO of Tarrington Industries. Former Marine, real estate mogul, one of the 10 most influential business leaders in the country. He stepped forward, eyes scanning the stunned crowd. "I'm looking for Daniel Reyes," he said, loud enough to cut through the spinning blades. Gasp rippled through the courtyard like electricity. "The farm boy?" someone whispered. "Why him?" Principal Everett's mouth opened, then closed. He straightened his tie, smoothing his expression into something resembling charm. "Mr. Tarrington," he said, stepping forward with a practiced smile. "This is an unexpected visit. I'm Principal Everett. May I ask what your business is with Mr. Reyes?" Tarrington's gaze didn't waver. It cut through Everett like a hot blade through paper. "He was expelled yesterday," Tarrington said flatly. "I'm here to correct that." Everett's smile faltered. "Well, I understand your concern, but the decision was made according to our standards. I'm afraid." "Your standards?" Tarrington interrupted, seemed to involve discarding brilliance because of birthright. Everett blinked, his ears reddened. Tarrington took another step forward. The students leaned in, caught in the gravity of this surreal showdown. "Daniel Reyes," he said again, turning toward the gathered crowd. "Where is he?" A quiet voice spoke up near the edge of the lawn. "He's not here." It was Elise Thompson, the only person who had ever offered Daniel a seat at her table during lunch. "He didn't come today," she added. "He got expelled." Tarrington nodded once, slowly, then turned back toward the helicopter. "I'll find him." With that, he climbed back into the aircraft. The door closed. The engines screamed to life once again. In seconds, the helicopter lifted, slicing through the clouds with impossible grace. The students stood still, the courtyard now silent save for a few confused murmurs. Inside Principal Everett's clenched jaw was the slow realization that something far larger than him had just landed, and left with purpose. Miles away, in a small farmhouse with creaky floors and a cracked front porch, Daniel Reyes was still in bed. The sound of approaching blades made the glass on his nightstand tremble. He ran to the window and froze. "Mom," he yelled. She was already outside, hands shielding her eyes as the helicopter descended just beyond the front gate. The door opened, and out stepped Dean Tarrington. Daniel stood paralyzed on the porch. The billionaire walked with intent, stopping a few feet from him. "You're Daniel," Tarrington said, though it wasn't a question. Daniel nodded slowly, unsure if he was dreaming. Tarrington extended his hand. "Your father once saved my company from a disastrous harvest. I never forgot what your family did for me." Daniel swallowed hard. "Why are you here?" Tarrington's eyes narrowed. Not unkind, but intense. "Because what happened to you yesterday should never have happened. And I plan to fix it." The helicopter returned an hour later, descending once again onto the immaculate courtyard of Ashton Hill Academy. But this time, Daniel Reyes was inside. He sat rigid beside Dean Tarrington, dressed in the same jeans and hoodie he wore the day he'd been expelled, now strangely at odds with the leather seats and gleaming chrome interior of the Billionaire's aircraft. His fingers trembled slightly on his lap, but his jaw was set. He wasn't here to beg. He was here to be seen. As the rotors slowed and the dust settled, every head in the courtyard turned toward the helicopter once more. Students gathered on the steps. Teachers froze mid-conversation. Even Mason Whitman, the trust fund golden boy, lowered his designer sunglasses to get a better look. Principal Everett was already outside, a tight smile on his face, palms flat against his sides like he'd been rehearsing diplomacy all his life. The moment the door opened and Daniel stepped out behind Tarrington, the murmurs began. "Is that? He brought Daniel back? What's going on?" Tarrington didn't slow. He strode across the lawn like he owned the school, because at that moment, he practically did. Daniel followed a half step behind, nerves knotting in his stomach. They stopped just feet from the front steps where Principal Everett waited. "Mr. Tarrington," Everett began, voice sugary. "I think we've had a bit of a misunderstanding." Tarrington cut him off, not with words but by holding up a single sheet of paper, a letterhead stamped with the golden insignia of Tarrington Industries. "This is a $10 million grant," Tarrington said, "for Ashton Hill's STEM program, library upgrades, and student scholarships." A hushed silence fell over the crowd. Everett's eyes sparkled with greed for a brief second. That's incredibly generous." "It comes with one condition," Tarrington continued. "Daniel Reyes returns to this school immediately with full academic standing, and you publicly apologize for what you did to him." Everett's face paled. "Mr. Tarrington," he said carefully, "I understand your concern, but we have admission standards, reputational integrity. I'm sure you understand." "I do," Tarrington interrupted. "That's why I'm here, because what you did to this boy," he gestured to Daniel, "wasn't about grades. It was about status." Students leaned forward. Mason folded his arms, suddenly uncomfortable in his $1,200 blazer. "You expelled a straight A student because of his boots," Tarrington said. "Because his dad owns a tractor, not a stock portfolio. That ends today." Everett's eyes darted across the crowd. The board members were watching. So were the teachers. Some were recording. "This isn't how we handle reinstatements," Everett snapped, his calm facade cracking. "We have a process." "You had your process," Tarrington replied. "You used it to crush a 17-year-old who worked harder than any legacy kid you've got enrolled." Daniel took a step forward. "I don't want special treatment," he said, his voice clear. "I just want the chance to prove I belonged here all along." That was when something remarkable happened. A student stepped forward, Elise Thompson. "He did belong," she said. "He tutored half the sophomore class in physics, including me." Then another student. "He stayed late to help build the science fair stage." "He helped me fix my car in the parking lot," someone else added. Voices joined like a wave, one after another, until it was no longer a murmur, but a movement. Principal Everett's face turned crimson. Tarrington watched it all, then said simply, "What's your answer, Principal?" Everett looked like a man cornered by truth. He turned to the students, swallowed, and forced out the words like stones in his throat. "Daniel Reyes is hereby reinstated. And I apologize." The words hung in the air. Tarrington nodded once and turned to Daniel. "Ready to go?" Daniel blinked. "Go?" "You're not staying," Tarrington said with a smile. "I've got a better place for you." Daniel's brow furrowed. "But you just got me back in." "You don't need validation from people who needed to be shamed into seeing your worth," Tarrington said. "I'm offering something real." Daniel turned to look at the school, at the faces watching him now, not with ridicule, but regret. He felt lighter than he had in days. He nodded. "Let's go." And with that, they left Principal Everett standing in his polished shoes, watching power slip through his fingers. The helicopter sliced through the clouds like a blade, glinting in the late afternoon sun. Daniel sat across from Tarrington, still stunned, trying to absorb the weight of what had just happened. He had walked back into the school that humiliated him, not with anger, not with vengeance, but with quiet dignity. And now he was flying away from it, not because he didn't belong, but because he had outgrown it. Tarrington studied him for a moment, then slid a folder across the sleek console between them. "What's this?" Daniel asked, glancing down at the thick stack of documents inside. "Your next chapter," Tarrington said. "A full-ride mentorship and leadership residency under the Tarrington Scholars Initiative. Housing, stipend, international access, mentorships from the best in engineering, robotics, sustainable farming, you name it." Daniel's hands hovered over the folder. "Why me?" he asked softly. Tarrington leaned back, folding his hands. "Because once upon a time, I was you." Daniel blinked. "I was the scholarship kid," Tarrington continued. "Public school, single mom, part-time job. I was mocked, doubted, underestimated. The first time someone believed in me, really believed in me, was a man named Reyes." Daniel's eyes widened. "Wait, that's my grandfather." Tarrington nodded, smiling faintly. "He owned a tiny tractor supply shop near my mother's apartment in Bakersfield. I was 14 when he let me sweep the floors after school. Told me I had a good head and good hands. He taught me how to fix small engines, how to show up early, and how to never talk down to people no matter how high you rise." Daniel sat frozen. "When I built Tarrington Enterprises, I tried to find him to say thank you, but by then, he'd passed." Tarrington's gaze darkened for a moment. "I never got the chance to repay that kindness until I heard about you." "So, you helped me because of him?" "That's part of it," Tarrington said. "But don't mistake this for charity. This isn't some legacy favor. I saw your transcripts, your essays, your community work. You didn't just earn your place at Ashton Hill, you've earned your place far beyond it." Daniel swallowed hard. The weight of those words sank into his chest like armor. "You saw me when no one else did," Daniel said quietly. "No," Tarrington replied. "You made yourself seen. I just knew what I was looking at." The helicopter began its descent over the outskirts of the city. Below, a sprawling glass and steel campus glittered. A sleek, modern facility surrounded by green tech labs, community gardens, and solar-paneled roofs. "Welcome to the Forge," Tarrington said as the pilot leveled out. "This is where the best minds come to solve real-world problems. Engineers, designers, dreamers. You'll be surrounded by students from all walks of life. But none of them handed anything. They're here because they bled for their dreams." Daniel stared in awe as the helicopter settled onto the landing pad. Staff waited below, some holding tablets, others in lab coats. A banner above the entrance read, "The Forge. Built from grit, driven by vision." Tarrington led Daniel down the steps. The wind whipped around them as they walked across the platform toward the main building. "You're going to learn things here no classroom at Ashton Hill could ever teach," Tarrington said. "Innovation doesn't come from ivory towers. It comes from soil-stained hands and late nights and voices that don't wait to be invited to the table." Daniel's chest swelled, not with pride, but with resolve. This wasn't a consolation prize. This was his beginning. A woman approached, sleek suit, bright eyes. She extended her hand. "Mr. Reyes, I'm Ava, Director of Student Integration. We've already prepared your housing, your course plan, and your mentorship schedule. You're in lab track 2, but Mr. Tarrington requested a few custom adjustments." Daniel shook her hand, still speechless. "We're honored to have you," she said. For the first time in what felt like forever, Daniel didn't feel like he was lucky to be here. He didn't feel like a charity case. He felt like he belonged. "Let's get started," he said, his voice stronger now. "I've got work to do," Tarrington smiled. "That's what I like to hear." And as the glass doors slid open and Daniel Reyes stepped into the next chapter of his life, he didn't look back. 3 months later, the air around Ashton Hill Preparatory had shifted. The corridors once filled with murmurs of privilege and exclusion now echoed with uncertainty. Faculty walked a little straighter. Students whispered less loudly. And Principal Everett? He was no longer wearing tailored suits, just nerves. The story of Daniel Reyes and the billionaire who came to his defense had spread like wildfire. The headlines had started small. Student expelled for being a farmer's son gets VIP return via helicopter. But they quickly evolved. Elite school faces backlash after bias exposed. Tarrington launches Equity Scholars Program, cites expelled teens' resilience. A quiet reckoning had begun. Parents started asking questions. Board members called emergency meetings. And some of the school's most prestigious donors quietly withdrew their pledges. The message was clear. The old ways weren't sustainable anymore. Everett now spent more time answering emails than shaking hands. And then one morning, he received a formal invitation. Mr. Everett, you are invited to attend the unveiling of the Forge's Community Innovation Lab. Open to the public. Students welcome. Guest of honor, Daniel Reyes. He almost didn't go, but curiosity, or perhaps guilt, got the better of him. At the Forge, the unveiling ceremony was nothing short of breathtaking. Hundreds had gathered. Tech founders, families, students from across the state. Media vans lined the street. The air buzzed with anticipation. A massive stage had been set up outside the main building, backed by a digital screen displaying real-time footage from the labs inside. Tents offered virtual demos. Booths shared student-led projects. At the center of it all stood Daniel, now in a charcoal gray collared shirt with the Forge emblem stitched above his heart. He wasn't just a student anymore. He was a leader in training. Tarrington stepped onto the stage first, welcomed by thunderous applause. When we started the Forge, he said into the mic, we weren't looking for perfect resumes or privileged pedigrees. We were looking for hunger, for fire, for young minds with something to prove. One of those minds came from a farm, he added, eyes flicking toward Daniel. One of those minds was almost buried under someone else's prejudice. He gestured for Daniel to join him on stage. The applause doubled. Daniel stepped up to the mic. No cue cards, no pre-written speech, just his truth. 3 months ago, he began, I was told I didn't belong, not because I failed, but because I came from the wrong zip code. They looked at my calloused hands and saw weakness. Not the boy who worked before school, aced every exam, and stayed after class helping others. A hush fell. That moment could have broken me, but someone saw through their judgment. He didn't save me. He reminded me that I never needed their approval to begin with. Daniel looked out over the crowd. His voice, once shaky, now rang like a bell. To every kid who's ever been told they're too poor, too brown, too weird, too other, you don't need to beg to sit at their table. Build your own. The audience erupted. From the back row, Everett sat stiffly in his chair. A sinking feeling settled in his stomach. Not just from the speech, but from the truth of it. He had underestimated Daniel. And now, the entire world knew it. After the ceremony, Daniel stood near one of the display tables showcasing a hydroponic farming model he'd helped design. A long line of guests came to shake his hand, offer thanks, or just say they were inspired. But when Principal Everett approached, Daniel's smile thinned. Mr. Reyes, Everett said, attempting civility. Principal Everett, Daniel replied. A beat of silence passed. The hum of the crowd continued behind them. I came to offer congratulations, Everett said. You came to witness what you tried to erase, Daniel corrected. Everett flinched, but didn't argue. I let my bias get in the way, he admitted. I won't pretend I can undo the damage, but I do want to learn from it. Daniel considered him. He didn't feel hatred. Not anymore, just clarity. Then start by making sure no other student has to go through what I did. I intend to, Everett said. Daniel nodded slowly. Good, because some lessons don't come from books. They come from being on the wrong side of the story. And with that, he turned away, back toward the next guest in line, back toward the future. That evening, after the crowds had dispersed and the sun dipped low behind the city skyline, Daniel stood on the forge's rooftop garden. Tarrington joined him, holding 2 mugs of fresh coffee. "You handled that like a man twice your age," he said. Daniel smiled. "I had a good mentor." They stood in silence for a while, overlooking the glassy horizon, the hum of the forge still faint in the background. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if you hadn't come that day?" Daniel asked. "Sometimes," Tarrington said. "But then I remind myself the real power was never in me showing up. It was in you not giving up." Daniel exhaled, letting that truth settle deep in his chest. "You think there are more kids like me out there?" "No," Tarrington said. "I know there are." Daniel looked back at the forge, his forge now too. "Then let's find them." Tarrington nodded. "And when we do, we won't just give them a seat at the table. We'll build them a whole damn room." And with that, under the silver glow of the city lights, the past finally made peace with the future. The farmer's son had not only survived the storm, he'd planted something that would grow for generations. What is the lesson of this story? 1. Your worth isn't defined by where you come from. It's defined by your work ethic, your integrity, and your heart. 2. Power means nothing if it isn't used to lift others up. Tarrington didn't just make a statement, he rewrote the rules. 3. Sometimes quiet strength speaks louder than outrage. Daniel never lashed out, he held his ground and let his dignity speak for itself. 4. Never underestimate the ripple of one act of kindness. A boy who helped a stranger years ago had that kindness return when he needed it most. 5. And lastly, when someone tells you that you don't belong, remember, that's usually the moment you're about to outgrow the room. What do you think about this story? Let's comment below to discuss. And don't forget to subscribe our channel to listen to more interesting stories.